Hey everyone, thanks for your patience with me being out today. I just wanted to give you some information and walk you through today's activities. And then also, there's going to be a mini lesson kind of attached to this, finishing up what we started last week. Okay. So, one of the things I want you to do is go to the assignment that says debate choices. You're going to click there. It's going to take you to a Google form. This is to help me plan a little bit better for later in the week and next week when we start to work on the debate. So, this is going to allow you to pick what your first choice would be, second choice, and so on. Okay. So, there's one, two, three, four, there's 5 ideas we're going to possibly use for a debate. I'm asking you to kind of vote for the one you're most interested in. I'm not asking you what side you would prefer to be on because I'm just going to assign that because I think it's important for you to kind of feel like what it really would be like to be on a debate team. So just you can fill that out with your choices there. Okay. That's your first thing. All right. Second thing is you're going to finish watching this video, which relates to the work we were doing. I think it was on Wednesday or Thursday. And we didn't finish it. So I just want to walk you through this because I'm not going to be in class to walk you through it. But I do think it's important for you guys to make sure you have some of this context. So we had started talking about the history with Native Americans and education. And I believe we made it to about down here. Okay. And we were talking about how they were taken many times off of the reservation and they were forced to assimilate, which means they were forced to kind of give up their culture and their language and their customary ways of living and take on the mainstream white culture. Obviously, you can imagine this is a very traumatic experience for the kids. Not only were they separated from their families, but they also had to learn a new language and they were forbidden to kind of, interact or have any of their own culture that would be comforting to them as well. Um, then this shifted into talking a little bit about education today and the idea that a lot of surveys and factual information is pointing to the fact that public schools are really not, and not just public schools, but the private schools as well, where there's more Native American students, that the students aren't being as successful as white students. So there's been some initiatives to try to address that have been created. This slide too, you can read through, but it's focusing on the idea about how can we help Native American children feel like they have access to culturally relevant teaching and learning practices in schools. In other words, how do we incorporate their culture into public schools and into schools in general, so that they see themselves represented? And this is something that's been ongoing. I know a lot of you guys are aware, up until fairly recently, we certainly have been teaching in the elementary levels about Thanksgiving in a really historically inaccurate way. We've also been, asking students to kind of do crafts and activities that also aren't necessarily appropriate. All of that has been starting to shift and change. And, more of that we think is needed. And that's kind of what some of the initiatives are coming out now of trying to create spaces so that Native American students feel represented. They see themselves in either the books they're reading, the texts they're reading, in the history that we're learning about. And hopefully, through doing that, it'll make them feel more of a part of the conversation. Okay. This right here is a video that I'm going to ask you to watch. It's called Little Dream Catchers. And I'm going to link it as an ed puzzle for you to watch so you can kind of stop and start this video. So what I would like you to do now is pause this video and go over and do this ed puzzle for Little Dream Catchers. Okay. When you're done with it, then you're going to come back here to this slideshow. Okay, so you should have watched Little Dream Catchers with using the ed puzzle, and we're going to keep moving on. The next section of this slideshow is going to talk a lot about the setting of the novel. I think it's important for you to know visually what area we're talking about. So the setting of it is all the way across the country to Washington State, not Washington, D.C., but Washington State. The information you already learned kind of talks about the history, but now I kind of wanted you to get a sense of modern society that, just to so you have that context too. While the stories of Native Americans fill the pages of our American history books, we seldom think of them as a living, thriving culture. While we live our lives in our cities, suburbs, and little towns, some Native Americans live among us, but many still live on the very same reservations, what Aaron Huey refers to as, quote, prisoner of war camps in his presentation. That was from the TED Talk, set aside for them by the U.S. government in the late 1800s. Life on these reservations, as we saw in the TED Talk with the photos, is very different from the lives lived by their native ancestors before the arrival of European settlers centuries ago. Most reservations suffer from serious problems, including some of the worst poverty in our country, poor educational systems, underemployment, and rampant alcoholism, and more recently, rampant drug abuse. And yet there remains a remarkable resilience and pride among American Indians. And I want you to look for evidence of this as you read the novel as well. So this is a map, obviously, and this is where the story is going to take place in Washington State. More specifically, it's going to take place in Welpinit. Okay. You can see from this map over here, there's a huge difference between the original Spokane Indian Territory and the current reservation area. Sorry, something just fell. Hang on a second. Okay, so the Spokane tribe once controlled and protected some 3 million acres of land. The Spokane Indians lived among the river in 3 bands known as the Upper, Middle, and Lower Spokane Indians. They fished the Spokane River as their main source of sustenance, and they used the falls as a gathering place of family and friends. In January of 1881, President Rutherford B. Hayes declared by executive order that the Spokane Indian Reservation, the new and permanent and much smaller home of the Spokane Indians. Okay, so the 3 bands of Indians were split up into 3 smaller reservations. And you can see the yellow part right here is what it should and originally was. And then this little piece here with the reservation is what it is now. Okay. So clearly, obviously, they lost a ton of land. The reservation was created in January of 1881. And again, it originally had over 3 million acres, and now it has 159,000 acres. So a huge loss. Welpinit is part of the Spokane Indian Reservation, and this is where Junior and the author, Sherman Alexie, grew up. So a lot of the information in the book is very true to what Sherman Alexie, the author, experienced. The small town of Reardon, that's also part of the setting of the book, are located in eastern Washington state near the Idaho border right here. Both settings are rural, meaning country, but they're very different in terms of culture. Welpinit is heavily influenced by the Spokane Indian Reservation and the Native American culture of that population. So there's traditional foods, dancing ceremonies, and the pride in traditional cultural practices there. However, the realities of reservation life there are also true. There's a high rate of unemployment, alcoholism, drug use, and domestic violence are definitely issues still struggling with there. Reardon, on the other hand, is a small farming community. It's about 20 miles outside the reservation. It's not a super wealthy community, but in general, the families and children have much more stable lives. For example, graduates of Reardon High School typically go on to college and careers, and many of the children on the reservation and in Welpinit will spend their lives there. What I'm also going to link this clip in an Edpuzzle from Resball Basketball in Lakota Nation, because you're going to see how basketball plays a huge role in Arnold's life. Another suggestion, which you could do on your own, I just started watching it. You may be interested in watching on Netflix. There's a documentary called Basketball or Nothing, and it's focused on a high school basketball team. And for 6 episodes, the reviewers will be able to see the journey of a Navajo Nation team on the way to the state tournament during the 2017 and 2018 academic year. So it's a nice documentary for kind of showing you more modern issues. Each episode is only about 30 minutes long. And even if you watch one or two of them, I have a feeling that you're going to get hooked because you want to see what happens. But overall, the whole series, if you watched it, would be about 3.5 hours long. But again, you don't have to watch it. It's just a suggestion if you are kind of interested. Um, Sean Martin is a Navajo athletic director at the school district where this documentary is filmed. And basically, he agreed to it because he wanted the world to kind of learn two lessons from this series. He writes, I hope this documentary educates the world on what happened in Native America. Number one, this next generation is dealing with trauma past with Native history. And number two, beyond educating the world on what has happened, I would love to make sure to lead more opportunities for all Native kids and Native communities. Okay, so he wants to make people more aware of the issues that are being struggled with on the reservations, but he also wants to see if he can help find better opportunities and more opportunities for the Native communities and the Native kids that he works with. A couple of other things that I just wanted to go over because you will hear about them in the novel, and I'm not sure what everybody's background knowledge is about Native American culture. It's going to talk about a powwow, which is an organized gathering of Native Americans. The word comes from the word powwow, which means spiritual leader. A modern powwow today usually means large gatherings of Native Americans, often with several tribes coming together, and it also includes some non Native people. Usually there's socializing, dancing, singing, and it's all to honor, protect, and perpetuate Native American culture. So it's very much a celebration. There are often outfit and dancing competitions, and some powwows will last for more than one day. The outfits are very important. They're usually very decorative and they're also very symbolic. They are not called costumes. It's almost like you wouldn't want to refer to them as costumes. It would make it seem like they're artificial or fake. So, you want to make sure that you wouldn't use that term. These outfits are very personal. They're worn for events considered to be a part of one's ongoing existence and continuous connection to their tradition. They are artistic expressions of the dancers' lives, their feelings, their interests, their family, and their spirituality. Usually, these are given also as gifts from elders, and they're considered a source of pride and kind of a great responsibility to take care of and carry on the tradition. Um, each season, changes are made depending on the fashion of the time or kind of depending on the personal taste of the dancer. They can blend historic elements with modern elements. For example, there might be traditional beadwork, but also at the same time, there might be Minnie Mouse braid holders. So there's kind of a mix, which is kind of interesting and fun between traditional elements and also modern elements. I should back up, sorry. This video here will show you what a powwow is, so I just want to show it to you.
Summertime in Turtle Island, so you know what that means. It's powwow season. But what is a powwow?
There are social gatherings where everyone's invited to dance, sing, and celebrate Indigenous culture. There are two types of powwows, traditional and competition.
Traditional powwows are usually smaller. They have teachings, ceremonies, and a feast.
People from all over the country take part in competition powwows. Top cash prizes are given to the best dancers, drummers, and drum groups. They typically follow the powwow trail and attend as many powwows as they can throughout the summer.
Dances and songs differ depending on the powwow's location, and each dance style and song has a different meaning.
Fancy shawl dancers mimic butterflies emerging from a cocoon. Grass dancers come in first.
The grass dance is a beautiful dance that represents the people that went first.
Jingle dancers are the healers and pray for those in need.
The jingle dress dance is a healing dance that originates from the Anishinaabe people.
Men's traditional tell stories of battles or hunts, while women's traditional move their feet slowly to massage the earth. Dancers work on their attire, called regalia, all year round. They're commonly adorned with elaborate beadwork and eagle feathers on soft leather or fabric applique.
These are considered ceremonial, and it is impolite to touch them without permission.
Photos are generally permitted, but it is polite to ask permission first. Most dancers will be happy to strike a pose. There are also art and food vendors at powwows.
Get your mocks on, get your braids tight, and I'll see you at the powwow trail. Update Shamil. See you later.
Okay, so that should have given you a little background about what a powwow is. Also, too, I know we've talked about this before. There's definitely been some controversy about the novel. It's been on the top 10 ban list since its publication, mainly for explicit sexual language, what's considered vulgar language by some people, racist content, and anti-Christian themes. At the end of the reading of the book, we will discuss whether you feel like any of these concerns are justified, and whether or not you feel like there is any sort of validity to banning the book. This is also one of the more popular books that's taught in high school, so we can kind of weigh in on it after you read the book. There's also been some more recent controversy that we're going to discuss about the novel once we have actually read the next novel called Tradition that we're going to read. I want to wait and hold off till we read that book before we take on some of the more new controversy surrounding the novel, because I think we'll have a better conversation then. Okay, so these are kind of the essential questions we're going to explore as you read. What factors shape our identities? Is it possible to be yourself and part of a group, even if you don't identify with parts of that group? What are the expectations placed on us by our communities? How do we rise above others' expectations in order to live the lives we want to live? What challenges do Native American people face in trying to attain hope in the American dream? What role does education play in the American dream? And is young adult literature getting too dark and or graphic? Okay, so those are just some of the things that we might be looking at. You, of course, can come up with other questions, and I will too as we move along. Okay. So you can ignore this slide. You're not going to have an activity for today. Okay. So once you have finished this, your job is now to read and make sure that you've covered the reading up to page 43. Tomorrow you will have some writing to do based on the reading. You will be able to use your novel, but you definitely need to have read that section in order to do a decent job on the writing part. So make sure you get caught up with any reading if you need to. I would guess most of you are probably already past that. And if you want to continue reading, feel free. Just make sure you don't spoil events for other people. Okay. So once you fill out this debate form and you've gone through this video with the Ed puzzle, you are all set for me and you can just read for the rest of the period. All right. Thanks, guys. And I'll see you on the Google Meet on Wednesday. Thank you.